Hello, this is JJ Humphrey. I am with Bobby Cleveland today, and this is Elephant in the Room, where we talk about what nobody else in Oklahoma wants to discuss. Today, we've got the Woolleys with us. Very glad to have you guys with us, discuss your case, and let everyone know what's going on in your case. Bob, before we get started, I've had a crazy computer at my office wouldn't work, had to turn around and come back, and then this computer had me locked out. I had to got on 30 seconds to spare. It was just barely able to do it. Um, last week we were at the border. We talked about what's going on at the border and just about how our government is failing to protect our border and how we're being invaded. This week, what we're going to talk about is government overreach and how the government can actually come in and accuse you of it's something as serious as murdering your own grandchild and it's sexually assaulting your grandchildren. And again, locking you up for around 8 months, dismiss the case because of lack of evidence. Now, I understand as a law enforcement person how that can happen, but if you refile the case, I will guarantee if I refile the case the second time and put people in jail for a second time, I'm going to win. I would not have filed that if I didn't have one heck of a case right there. But in the Woolleys case, they were charged. They were left in jail. Guys, was it 8 months?
Yes, total 8 months.
4 months
The first time, and then the second time, how many months were you left in? 4
4 months.
months. So you got a total of an entire year in jail, and each time the prosecution, the state dismissed. So for you guys that don't understand how the court system works, if you go to trial and you complete the trial and the jury finds you not guilty, you can't you can't be tried again. But if the defense or if the prosecution uh, dismisses the case, then you never got a jury trial, and so they dismiss it so that they can refile it. And they refiled this again. They refiled it again. So they filed multiple times on y'all, right?
They filed a total of 3 times.
right? And there was
So
26 different charges, amended charges, new
Felonies.
charges between myself and my oldest daughter and Bill.
The biggest thing is even after they dismissed the murder and sexual assault, they had no evidence at all. They went ahead and filed new charges against us and brought our daughter, our oldest daughter, the mother of the boys, in on it too. And it was for neglect.
so let me just how about just telling us all how this, I mean, did y'all wake up one day, find your baby? So you had custodial custody of both of your grandkids, right?
Legal guardianship.
Guardianship, okay. So you had both your grandkids living with you. Y'all woke up one morning and found the, go ahead and just tell us what happened.
He went to work or was getting ready to go to work and take Clayton to the bus stop. So he took Clayton to the bus stop. We had a sick dog going on. And then the baby hadn't been feeling very well the night before. He acted like he was teething, like his allergies were kicking up. He always struggled with allergies. He was constipated and had a low grade fever. So we thought, well, if he's not doing better by tomorrow, we'll take him in to be checked. Well, he'd already gone and taken Clayton to school or to the bus stop. But before that, before he did, he came to me and he said, "Hey, the dog looks like he's taking a turn for the worse. He looks really bad." So I went and checked, and I had to run him down to the vet, to the closest vet. And so we had to ask my daughter to stay here with the boys until we got back, or with Elijah until we got back. Elijah was still sleeping. And usually he woke up between 9 and 10 in the morning, which wasn't unusual for him. But when he was sick, it was especially, he would sleep more. So anyway, I thought to myself, I'm going to go in and take this bottle because he was struggling with constipation. So I thought I better really push the fluid because he's getting constipated again. So I fixed him a bottle with a smooth move laxative tea that I put in every one of his bottles because constipation was a constant problem. Put it on the dining room table as I was on my way passing through to go to his room. Walked into his room with my usual, is there a baby in here? Little game that I did, but he didn't respond. And as I walked and got closer to the bed, I was startled because he looked like he was in the same position as he was when I laid him down. He still had the Thomas the Train blanket over his shoulders. He was on this white cotton mattress pad that I laid him on because he was seemed like he was drooling a lot. And so I reached down for him and I put my hands around him and I could feel, even though he had 2 layers on, I could feel the cold coming through. And so I screamed, and my daughter, who had the room right next to him, my 17-year-old daughter, she came running. And I told her, call 911, call 911. So she called 911, and gosh, the fire department is half a block away. So they were here in a heartbeat. And then we had other people coming in, DHS people, the sheriff's department. As I told you earlier, the detective was on his way. He told his supervisor on the way that he knew he was going to a murder scene because there is no such thing as a SIDS death. And so that's how it kind of all kicked off. That was started the slippery slope.
Had you ever had any trouble at all with DHS?
Never. We've never had any trouble with the law at all. The most, probably the worst thing we've ever had was a traffic ticket or an accident.
Right.
So that officer had already made up his mind. You're saying that there is no such thing as SIDS, yet he's not a medical person, and the medical community says otherwise, that there is SIDS cases, and that's pretty common. A not common thing, but I mean it is a well-known fact.
What is SID?
He told everybody in their interviews. He interviewed Bill, myself, each one of our kids, our pastor, and he told every single person in every interview, there's no such thing as SIDS. SIDS doesn't exist. And then he said the same thing on the stand under oath.
SIDS is where it's infants die in their sleep. Generally respiratory. I don't know what it actually stands for, but that's kind of what it actually
sudden infant death syndrome.
Sudden infant death. Okay.
So how did y'all know that he's made that statement? There's no SID to his supervisor.
His supervisor wrote a notarized statement, testimony, saying that.
Plus,
and then he also said it to a judge. He said it to a judge too.
He said it under oath also in our preliminary hearing. It's well documented.
Yeah.
This is
so they also accuse. I mean, so the baby was sent. Elijah was sent to a medical examiner.
Yes. The coroner on site with the detective alone in the room for probably an hour, and then they brought him out in a body bag and took him to the medical examiner's office.
Mm-hmm. And then they put him in the refrigerator until the next morning. So his body was pretty much almost in full rigor when he went. And so the I don't know how it happened, but somehow the detective, I don't know, he invited himself. Somehow he got in and he got to be there for the autopsy, even though he's not medical personnel. So he was side by side with her while she was doing the autopsy, and he refers to, in testimony, he says he was there for the slicing and dicing of Elijah. So anyway, she wrote a report, quite thorough report, but none of the experts, we've got 6 of them now, can figure out how she came to her conclusions, because the reports all seem to indicate that he was normal in all respects. And then she concludes by saying he was murdered through asphyxiation and blunt force trauma to the anal rectal area, that there were lacerations, but there were no lacerations. So you're supposed to take slides, tissue samples of every place where you think there's a wound to determine if it's really a wound or if it's something else, a birthmark or a tumor or something like that. So she only took a few, and she took them in the anal rectal area. And what you're looking for is you're looking for blood, because there's no wounds other than like rug burns or something that don't involve blood infiltration. Bruises are blood infiltration, hematomas have blood infiltration, lacerations, all that involves blood infiltration. Not a single slide had any blood. His diaper didn't have any blood. His colon was full of feces. One expert said there's no way this child was abused because his colon is full of feces that has not been displaced or disturbed. It's not possible.
Right.
The other doctor from the expert from Michigan said that he had none of the signs of asphyxiation. He had none of the signs of sexual abuse. There was no cuts. There was no lacerations. There was no blood in the slides. There was no bruising, fabric imprints, teeth, loose teeth. The high points of the face were not depressed like they would be if you were holding down a child. There was no signs of struggle. There was no marks on his body. There was no petechiae. His eyes were clean white, no broken capillaries, which is one of the first things they look for. His frenulum, which I guess is one of the first things they look for in child abuse cases, but usually there's a little tear in the frenulum or a big tear. Anyway, his frenulum was normal. It just was dumbfounding to the experts. They couldn't figure out how did she get to here, you know. And the only thing we can think of is that same detective that kept trying to influence everybody somehow got himself invited into that autopsy.
He biased it.
He's
Well, how long before they completed the autopsy before they arrested y'all?
Well, they had to wait for all the labs to come back. So
14 days.
they arrested us before it was actually finalized completely. But she had pretty much made up the decision outside of the lab work that wasn't done right up front within a day or two. But the unique thing about her assessment was her written assessment said that after examining the body and everything about it, that this was a well-nourished, well-developed, healthy infant with no remarkable signs at all. But yet she says all this trauma happened to him and the back end of it. So it doesn't make any sense what she's come up with.
Right. Dr. Schmidt kept saying it's impossible for there to be a wound without blood infiltration on the slides.
One of the problems that he did have as an infant all his life was he was very constipated, and he would pass these hard, dry stools about the size of a golf ball on a regular basis. And ironically, when he passed away, he was passing one. It was half in and half out. And so it was exactly what we were telling them. But when they washed out his cavity there, they said, look at how enlarged it is. And they used that with rigor mortis set in because it molded around that hard, dry stool. And that's why they said that he was sexually assaulted.
Yeah,
they fabricated
the anus was dilated, but they try to say it's because he'd been abused over and over again daily in the open living room with the whole family looking on, is what they were purporting. When really, like he said, the body molded around the poop that was coming out.
And that's what our expert ME said from.
So they're saying that you sexually assaulted your kid your grandson on a daily basis in front of everyone. What evidence do they have to support that?
Zero.
Well, they took Clayton to have a sexual assault nurse examiner.
So Clayton is the older grandson, correct? So everybody knows what's going on.
He had a clean rape kit. He came out of his exam clean. But then she says, like I said, she was the only one that didn't have any witnesses present and no recording. So her testimony was completely hearsay, but they accepted it anyway. She says that Clayton said that the baby was sitting on Papa's privates every day. Well, he was always sitting right here in the evenings watching the news, and he would do a feeding for me. And the baby was sitting on his lap. True enough, it was across his lap. But she never said, well, what was Papa wearing or what was the baby wearing? Because that would have put it. You can't assault.
And here's the fact for our listeners so that our listeners understand when you're doing a forensic interview with a child, there are certain things they have. I mean, if you are trained to do that, not everybody can go in and interview children. I've been in law enforcement for a long, long time. I'm a decent interviewer, pretty decent. I've got pretty good vocabulary skills. I talk all the time, but you got to be able to listen. But also, you have to be trained in not leading children and not giving them the answers that you want them or lead them into, as well as one of the first things you have to make certain is that you tape the interview. And in that training, they will teach you, and I know this because I've been around a bunch of this, they will teach you to make certain that you turn on the tape. So it's not just you need to tape it. They got a step by step. Hey,
Right.
make sure you do this. Make sure you. And one of the things is to make sure that you turn on that tape. So for a person to go in and do an interview on a possible sexual case involving a fatality, uh, it is grossly negligent and unbelievable that somebody would do that. Was that person with the Tulsa police department? Was that person with DHS? Who was that person with?
They were an independent nurse that was supposed to be trained in this area, that was subcontracted through Kid Space in Muskogee.
Right.
The unique thing with her though, she did her full exam, which is the parts that she was supposed to do, the physical, the emotional, psychological. And she said there was no reason to refer Clayton, a 5-year-old, out for anything at all traumatized.
Under oath, she said he wasn't traumatized, and so she didn't refer him for any aftercare. It's like, okay.
Oh, hold on. I just want to make sure we understand this. So on one hand, she said that this child had watched y'all sexually assault a baby and sat in the room while everybody watched this baby being sexually assaulted on a daily basis. And on the other hand, she says, hey, your grandson's not traumatized. Nothing's wrong. He is completely normal and does not need counseling. Am I understanding that right?
Exactly. She had no
That's
reason to.
insane.
Yeah.
That right there, to do an
JJ.
interview. So just so our listeners know, to do that interview, no tape, no recorded document is inexcusable. To interview that kid in that situation, inexcusable. To come up with that analysis, assessment is another thing. Unbelievable that somebody can say that. You don't have to be trained to understand that if your child has witnessed that kind of thing, they're traumatized and need counseling. And if you say they're not traumatized and don't need counseling, how can you reach that conclusion? Unbelievable.
The statewide SANE nurse coordinator over all the SANE nurses recently did a evaluation of the SANE nurse report to see if it was valid, and she said it's not valid. She said there was full of leading questions. They were talking to him way beyond his years. They interviewed him way too long. There was inconsistencies, and so she submitted that report. We now have it. So she's our 6th expert witness, and so the SANE nurse is not even aware yet that this has taken place. But I'm kind of anxious for her to get a copy
So
of it.
your expert witness is saying exactly what I'm saying, in
Yeah.
that you interview on tape. It all has to be recorded. You can't do leading questions. Again, you've got to do age appropriate questions. You can't interrogate, even interrogating adults. I've seen cases thrown out on adults because you kept them too long, too many. They were pressured into some of the things that were done in cases, and I've seen cases thrown out on that. But so your experts are saying that this was done inappropriately, and that you can't use the information. That's what they're saying, correct?
Correct. And the thing that they did, to substantiate, they wanted to substantiate what she put in her written report. And so they had, 4 days later, they had a second forensic interview by the same forensic interviewer that did the first one. And it's videotaped and audioed. And they tried with all her skills to get him to substantiate anything that he said in that same nurse interview. And he didn't substantiate one thing. He actually said none of that happened. And then they hid that from us for over a year and wouldn't give it to us and said it didn't.
So again, just so people understand what we're saying, when you interview, in fact, I'm no expert in doing interviews with children. Okay, so that's out of my bailiwick area a little bit, but I do know that it becomes problematic to interview a child multiple times. It gets problematic just to do that. So the fact that they were willing to do it a second time is a little problematic. The fact they do it on tape is great to get to the truth, and to that way you know the questions that are asked. That way it's verifiable what was said and how they said it and what was their interaction. Because again, some of the things that you got to do, you got to have this on tape. Because it's not just what I said. If I write down what I said, but how did I say it? What were my mannerisms? What were the way? How am I coming across to this child? So it needs to be on tape. But here's the mind-boggling part that I keep getting into on your cases. Why would the prosecution withhold evidence, exculpatory evidence? There's a law called Brady, and what it's talking about is that the prosecution can't withhold evidence from the defense. You can't withhold things like this that would clear you and that would say, hey, that's not true. And for them to have that and to hold that is problematic. That is a serious problem. And that's what we're looking into. These are the things. So was that, who did that? Was that the county? Was that the DA's office? Was that DHS? Who did that?
DA's office ordered the second forensic interview because he wanted to confirm and get on tape what the same nurse said he said. So for clarity's sake, there's number one, the first interview by the DHS investigator at school that they hid from us.
Same day.
Yeah, that was the day of the baby's passing. The next day, they took Clayton to Headspace in Muskogee, and there was a forensic interview given by their top forensic interviewer. It was clean. Then they followed that with the same nurse examination that wasn't recorded. And then the DA found out what supposedly Clayton said in that. So he ordered another forensic interview a few days later. So there was a fourth interview. And then there was a few more that happened after that from DHS workers. There was even the ADA actually took Clayton into her office and had a little private interview with them before a hearing, which I guess was also illegal. So two of those key interviews, the most exonerating, they were all exonerating except for the same nurse interview. But the first one and the second forensic interview were the most exonerating, because in the second forensic interview, the interviewer gets to the end of the interview and is kind of frustrated because she can't get him to say what she wants. And so she says, Clayton, you know you can tell me anything, right? And kids talk to me all the time. And he said, can I be done now? He kept saying, can this be over? Can I be done now? Can I go play? And kept making excuses to get out of the room. But she said, no, we got to keep going. So anyway, she said, you know you can talk to me, right? And he said he didn't want to. But then she said to him, didn't you just tell the same nurse a few days ago about what happened with Brothers Privates? And he said no, indicating that he never even had that conversation. So that interview was hidden from us. So those two interviews that were hidden from us were the first one and the second forensic interview, because he directly said, no, this didn't happen.
So you just lost one grandkid, and you're going through all the trauma with that. And then you're no more losing that grandchild than you're going through all these interviews. had they taken custody of Clayton at that time? Where did they, were they leaving Clayton with you guys, or had they removed him from the home?
They removed him that time they took him to Muskogee.
without a hearing.
They
Okay.
took him from my sister's lap in the driveway that they wanted to take him, um, as foster care. Also, there was a bunch of family members who would take him. And the ironic thing is Desiree, the mother, was very able and capable of having him because she'd been clean 2 years. She was on staff with the Chakota up there Teen Challenge Freedom House.
Right.
She had her own vehicle, her own apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. She had everything required from DHS, more than everything. And the facility that she was in was a DHS approved facility for not only Oklahoma, but other states where their children stayed with the mothers there in that dorm. And they refused to let her have her own child.
And so
So
that's
so DHS refused. The mother would not allow the mother to have, which for our listeners, DHS and courts are always are their main goal should be to try to reunite children with their family. That's typically their goal. In this case, they refused to let the mother, who was not involved, she's at an approved place. So did they have a hearing saying they were going to refuse that? How did they reach that conclusion?
they made a fraudulent document and perpetrated a fraud on the court, making up a cause for taking Clayton from her. And we were just explaining this earlier.
That was after the fact, but they made that determination before any hearing. They just determined they weren't going to allow her to have him, period, and nobody in our family, period. Then they went to the court to have her parental rights terminated for no reason. And that's where that whole document came up about them fabricating it,
Yeah.
making
So,
up.
so they're going to have her rights terminated. Now, did they look at any of your family? You said you had a sister there that was willing to take him in. I think y'all said the pastor and other people in your church. So did they look at close relatives? Did they look at, friends of the family where he would be more used to his environment?
No, they didn't. They refused to. And even after they applied for it, they sent information. They passed all the background checks and everything. They still never even acknowledged any of them.
Yeah. My sisters and their husbands went through the whole screening process and the whole training process and got certified. And they wouldn't even acknowledge them, their petitions or their phone calls. Our pastors, caregivers.
Did they ever state why they wouldn't consider anybody that y'all were trying to place him with?
It was obvious. They didn't say so, but they had to find somebody who thought we were guilty.
No, they didn't want to say, they didn't say anything. They didn't answer anybody other than they just said that, I don't remember what Gabriel had said, but they were basically they didn't answer any of the requests.
And they took Glory because she was 17 at the time. They also took her and put her in foster care.
2 weeks short of 18.
Yeah, and she was screened. They screened that home and made sure it was appropriate. And they said it was a good home. They put her there, but they wouldn't let Clayton go with her. They wanted to keep Clayton away from every member of the family.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm
Do
like,
you think that's because they didn't want anybody influencing his testimony? Or was it that they were worried that y'all might have contact? Did they ever tell you why they would not do that?
No, they didn't. But I think that's probably what it was, because they wanted to have all the control over his testimony. And so that's why they put him through so many interviews, I think, was to try to kind of groom him. And remarkably, for a 5-year-old, we were so impressed. We were like, wow. I mean, he really stood his ground and stayed consistent. The only one that was not consistent was the one that we have no proof of, that wasn't recorded. So,
What about the judge in this? What's he say?
Well, there was multiple judges. It depends on if you're talking about the criminal or the juvenile case.
Yeah.
There's 2 different things going on at the same time.
Yeah.
But we went through all kinds of judges in our criminal case, but none of them would ever give any testimony back. The only time we found out what a judge thought was when Judge Shook, who gave us our guardianship in the beginning, and we had seen him twice a year for 5 years on these boys. He came back and said, this is totally ridiculous. And he had retired at this time. And he's now advocating for us. And he is working with different various people to try to resolve this.
Right.
So let's get this straight. The family court judge who knew you and had been working with you for years is in your corner. Now, let me, there's an aspect to this I don't understand. There was somebody from the ME's office, from the medical examiner's office, that came over to your side and also testified that he's testifying in your behalf. Is there not? Am I wrong on that?
I think you're thinking of the chief medical examiner of Detroit, the child
Okay.
abuse.
So
Probably.
it's not, it wasn't Oklahoma's medical examiner. It was a
No.
different medical examiner looked at this and said they're totally wrong. Now,
Yeah.
I think something else that's important for our listeners to know. Y'all go Google up the Oklahoma medical examiner and see just how they qualify. See if they're in the top in the nation or in the lowest in the nation. And I can tell you, let me kind of ruin it for you, that they are absolutely, if they ain't the lowest, they're right there at the lowest. Are they even certified? Do y'all know if they? I know y'all looked at that more than I have. Are they certified?
2009, they lost their certification, their accreditation. They actually got the lowest score ever given by the accreditation in the history of the United States.
Right.
And
lowest score in the history of the United States belongs to Oklahoma medical examiner.
Yep.
Boy, you can't top that. That's hard to top, ain't it?
That
Yeah,
is.
there's investigation and an article written on it called "You Get What You Pay For," and it talks about how why they got such a low rating, basically.
Right.
So somebody could probably Google that if they wanted to find. And nothing since then. They've never gotten their accreditation because nothing has improved.
Yeah, we're trying to make sure to invest some money and change that. Us legislators presently. If you look at Bobby Cleveland right there, Bobby's during that time when he used to be a legislator, he probably the one didn't fund that. We'll blame it on Bob. That's what we'll. But so
hey,
how
JJ,
long?
hey, JJ,
What's that?
hang on a second. I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure this out. For all this trouble they've had twice going to the jail, it took more than one person to do this, to get this together. You got your medical examiner, you got DHS, and you got this detective. Now all those people would falsify records.
Bob, that's what we're going, and we're trying to have hearings because there's multiple cases like this in Oklahoma where you have a kind of, what lack of a better word, a cabal going on, to where when the district attorney comes out and says it's going to be this way, then everybody just starts trying to prove that way. Everybody's going along with that. So again, here's the evidence. Let me give you the proof of what we're saying. They kept them in jail eight months and dismissed. Why'd they dismiss on you guys?
Lack of evidence.
No evidence. So then they turn around and re-arrest you, keep you in jail 4 more months. They dismissed again for lack of evidence.
Yes.
They refiled and they've dismissed it again for lack of evidence.
Exactly. The same evidence for each one. We were just so that we get the record straight. We were in 4 months the first time and 4 months the second time. Total of 8 months.
It's 8 months total. Okay. Yeah, I misunderstood that because I thought you were in there for about a year. So,
No.
yeah, that's
Okay,
my bad.
I
think
got it,
I can
JJ.
put it out.
I got that, JJ. It was 2 times. I knew you was wrong, but I didn't want to tell you anything.
Bob, I appreciate that. I don't like being told I'm wrong. It hurts. It hurts really bad. But I can't admit when I'm wrong. So not a problem. So basically you get arrested, stay in jail 4 months. What I mean, again, do y'all have? I mean, did that kill your income? What? I
You
mean,
lost.
there's
Yeah.
You never realize how important your good name is until you lose it. And then the sheriff got on the air before he leveled the murder charges. He gets on the air and he says, "We know that some one of those people in that house killed that baby." That was it. That's when we started getting death threats. Oh, you should have seen the
But
stuff that people were saying, driving by our house, throwing things in our yard, and acting like they wanted to shoot us. We were afraid to come out of our house for probably a year and a half after all the charges were dropped, because there was just, you lose your good name, you lose your income, you lose your ability to make an income. You end up selling everything you can to, pay for your fees. It's just, and then our health, I mean, boy, did we take some hard hits.
oh
I
yeah, you're
had
stressed out. It's stress. I've not been through anything like y'all been through, but I've been through. We talked about that a little bit, and what people don't understand here, it's not only you're going to lose your good name, you lose your job, you lose your income, but and all these threats and you're bad. When you've had a good name, and just the fact that people are saying that kind of stuff about you are just devastating. But you're also going through the loss of your child, your grandchild, and now your other one's been removed, and two grandchildren actually. You're trying to deal with all of that, then stack on the legal fees, and then stack on the concern about having to go to prison the rest of your life. Uh, it's just hard to even describe what all was going on with y'all, and then it gets dismissed. And again, here's where I'm at. I will say I understand if a DA believed that case, but again, why do you believe it? Where's the evidence? You got to have evidence, and then to refile it and not have anything else. You just dismissed it for lack of evidence. Why would you go back and refile it with the same evidence and then turn around and do it again and just perpetuate this continual, you know, if you got a case, file it. Absolutely. If you don't file it. But then now what we're facing is you still have the worry that he can turn around and file that any day that he wants to, because he's not ever taking you to court. So everybody says, well, he can't keep doing this. Yes, he can, because people don't understand. Double jeopardy does not. Everybody wants to say double jeopardy, double jeopardy. Yeah, there's a thing out there called double jeopardy, but you got to have a jury come back and find you not guilty for double jeopardy to apply. And he's dismissing it because he knows he'll lose if he takes the case. That's why he dismisses it, and he's dismissing it to give him an opportunity to come back and refile. And I don't really have a problem with that as a law enforcement person, but don't refile unless you have something to refile.
right.
That's where you're at. But at the end of the day, a lot of people don't want to say you're innocent. People have a problem saying you're innocent. I've noticed that. I've talked to several reporters, and I've talked because my involvement here recently. I've got involved in your case, and I'll have people call me up, a reporter or two call me up, and I'll use the word innocent, and they'll go, "Well, now they ain't been found innocent." And I always had to say, "Listen, under the eyes of the law, you are innocent till proven guilty." Now you can say, "Oh, they ain't been found innocent." No, they ain't been found guilty. They were innocent until found guilty. So it's not you were found innocent. That ain't going nowhere in the court system. You again, yes, we can find you innocent. We can find you not guilty, is what that one says. But you are innocent till proven not guilty. So in the eyes of the law, there is no reason for the court system to have come and taken these kids out of your home, correct?
Correct.
right, and with no jury trial like the Constitution requires. One thing that's totally remarkable to me is shortly before they dropped the last of the charges, the DA's office approached Bill's attorney and said he had a deal for us. And what they wanted to do is they wanted us to sign off our guardianship rights forever and turn it over to the foster mom. And in exchange for that, they were going to drop all the felony charges and they were going to give us generous visitation to include sporting events and holidays. So I'm like, right then and there, I was so confused because I thought, wait a minute, how do you give generous visitation to murderers and child rapists? So right then and there, I knew that the DA knows we're not guilty, but he just doesn't know how to get out of it and save face. So
Well,
there's
I'm involved in an ATF case where ATF came in and raided a person's home and basically told them if they'd sign away their license to sell firearms, that they'd make everything go away. And then they offered them $10 a gun, and so we, if you look up the law, that's called extortion. And if you look up the law, there's a statute in the law that talks about extortion by color of government. And what that means is using your government position to extort. And I think it's time that we've got to start looking at this, because just right there, you know what I'm saying? They can't convict you, and they're trying to use their position to withhold your children, which is constitutional violation, and then try to tell you if you will do this, and we're extorting you, we're going to extort you and use your kids as a means to extort you, and then we're going to turn around and get you to sign something. It's also called extortion by signature. Again, I'm no lawyer. I don't claim to be an expert in the law, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn one time, and I when I stayed in a Holiday Inn, I pulled up the Oklahoma statute and looked at it a little bit, and I do believe both of those are in the statute, and both of those kind of cover what we're talking about. And I know that sounds far out for people, that we need to start looking at these people who abuse. But I'm gonna tell you something. Our our rule of law in America, not just Oklahoma, the rule of law is under attack. And if we don't start taking back and holding the people accountable, that have these positions, they can't abuse these positions just because they think something. They've got to follow the law. And
Well,
so,
JJ,
yeah,
okay, look where I look at this is you got the DHS, that's one person. You got that detective, that's two people. You got a medical examiner, that's three people. You've done all this, but you've never gone to court. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
well, here's the deal, Bob. They took your kid and you never went to court. You're guaranteed a day in court. If they want to take your kid, let them walk in and say, here's why we're taking their kid. Here's why they're a danger to this kid. Guess what? There's plenty of kids that need to be taken out of the home. I've been to 1,000 homes where them kids shouldn't have been in that home.
All right, but here's a
But
question though. Why, what would be the purpose of all those people included on this case? Why would they all want to
they
get
just
into it?
make up their mind. Here's the deal. That's the deal. I can show you right now, case in this same county, I believe, where a person threatened to kill the kids, threatened to kill themselves. A 17-year-old nephew wrestled the gun away from him. A month later, DHS, I think now I got to go back and look, but the courts returned the kids. The kids had a good home with their dad. The courts returned the kids to the mom, and guess what? Mom kills herself. She said she's going to do it a month earlier. Now she does it, kills all the kids, kills herself, and everybody's. And guess what? It's all the same people. Why would they do that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I got one that we even got the DHS records on another case where they send a guy and they send him by accident his own file, and it says right in there, we know that he didn't do all this. We know the wife is the one doing it, and yet we're going to get how stupid can you be to write that stuff in it? So
Okay,
that's what we're talking about,
But
Bob.
they have records of some records that wasn't turned over. Did I
We do
understand?
now, but they didn't turn over those two interviews, which were key.
Yeah.
But here's something else that they didn't ever do. See, when they investigated this, they selectively investigated it. When the paramedics came up to our house, they said it's a classic SIDS case. Well, the detective took over and said it's murder. So but he doesn't take evidence that he didn't want. Like there was 2 weeks worth of dirty diapers. If I was sexually assaulting this baby, even once or twice, don't you think that would be a gold mine of evidence?
Oh, absolutely.
Want those diapers.
Right.
They had the mattress pad that was underneath his mouth that supposedly was suffocated against. They didn't want that either, but they took the sheet that was under it. They didn't interview one caregiver who the boys had been in their custody solo with them. Either they were professionals or babysitters or grandparents or teachers. Almost every day of their life, they were in somebody else's care. They didn't interview one of these people at all, not one of them. So they only selected what they wanted.
Right. Now, the medical examiner's report said that he had some pneumonia in one lung, but she said it was non-contributory. And the mattress pad that he was referring to had a huge 18-inch stain on it. They left that and didn't take it. They were supposed to turn it over to the ME to help her determine the cause of death. And it had to be heavy with fluid when they picked it up, so you could not notice it. But we still have it. It's still here. And they never took
it with pneumonia that has fluid all over and dies during the middle of the night, and that's not contributory, and that's not something we ought to consider. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. So right now, you're fighting to get your grandchild back, and
Yes.
again, you have not been found guilty.
Yes.
So who is it responsible? Is it DHS? Is it the court system? Who is responsible right now for withholding custody of your kid? And what are they claiming that they can withhold your grandchild?
3, the judge has the right to restore a family.
Judge Brown and
Judge
Stillwell.
Elizabeth Brown. The DA
Jack Thorpe
can tell the judge, I've got new evidence, and he does. We've sent him new evidence, and tell her, hey, I've got new evidence. I know for sure they're not guilty. That's an out for him. That's an easy out.
Yeah, but here's the deal. It don't really matter if they can't prove you guilty. You're not guilty. You're innocent.
Right.
So it doesn't matter.
And the other one, the DHS has the power to take the charges that they called substantiated and unsubstantiate them, taking away any kind of offense now. So they have the power to do that. The DA can move to have the Clayton restored to us, and the judge can actually order it.
So here's the deal.
Now, wait a minute. Wait, the judge can order it. I thought we didn't have a judge involved.
The judge over the juvenile case.
Yeah, not
that it still exists because of the guardianship that was put in place.
Okay, yeah, I remember. Okay.
And again, here's the deal. I get, I mean, if I came in and I truly believed that you allegedly assaulted your kids, sexually assaulted, and murdered your baby, I get taking that child out of your custody. Again, I'm going to try to place that child, and this is what normally happens. Normally, that child is placed with a family member, somebody close to the family, because that's the best alternative for the child, and that's what they're generally looking at. It has been my experience, and I've worked a long time around that stuff, and so that's been my experience. They didn't do that in this case. This has been 6 years. They have not filed on, or they filed on you multiple times. They have never continued to go to court because they know they will lose. There hasn't been a hearing to return the child. And so, again, what we did the other day, you had a friend who is quite experienced. He's got a whole family of lawyers, and I think he's typed up I know he typed up an affidavit for you. And so kind of explain what that affidavit says.
Basically, the affidavit brings in the constitutional law and shows that the Constitution says you cannot take a person's child away, and you cannot take away a guardian's child away without giving them a jury trial first. You have to give them due process. They have to have a chance to speak. That was never done. It also shows about the Social Security Act and where they get the funds. There's funds, there's kickbacks every time they take a child from their home. There's a kickback for the judge, for the DA, for
Attorneys.
the attorneys, for the
I'm
family.
I'm gonna be looking into that. I've got to find the verification of that. When I find that, I'm gonna raise. I know I ain't supposed to say this on here, but I'm gonna raise three kinds of hell when I find that. I'll start really going off on that.
The part about the violation was that in any situation where there's a question of whether abuse has happened or not, removing the child is appropriate. And in this case, I believe it was appropriate because they didn't know. But
Right.
they're terminate our guardianship without a jury trial is violating the constitutional rights that we have.
I agree with that. You're saying exactly how I feel. I get why they did it at first. I think it was a righteous move at first. But if you can't file on you, if you have no evidence, there becomes a place where we got to go. Are we right? Because there ain't nothing that you know what I'm saying. If I can't find evidence, I can't find evidence. If all the experts come and say it's SIDS, at some point, do I have a responsibility to say, okay, was I wrong? And here's what I know, investigators. I when I was young, I did the same thing. You go in, you make your mind up what's going to happen or what has happened, or you decide, and then you go make everything fit to how you decide it needs to fit. And you go influence and you go do, and that's what's happened. And I just want to leave people with this. You know, Bob, I see where you're kind of coming from. How do you get DHS? How do you get? But I want to tell you that I've been involved in a murder case where we see that the DA purposely destroyed, not one piece, but 10 key pieces of evidence to have a guy executed. We see that same DA withholding evidence, like what's it withheld from y'all, same thing. But here's the deal. Guess what? Wasn't just one DA did it. It was two or three did. Wasn't just one AG did it. These AGs had all of this information. Same thing. Wasn't just them, but the appellate court, when given all of this 100% proof, with their new AG saying this is so over the top, we've got to remand it back for a new trial. Our appellate court said, Our parole board said, How does that even happen? How does those bodies that if because it's beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's absolute evidence when you know that the DA is guilty of committing felonies. How do they uphold that? And I've seen that case recently come forward. I'm seeing case after case, whether it be the ATF abusing their positions. And again, as a law enforcement person, as a person who loves our court system, who loves what our country is because of the legal system we have, it pisses me off when I see people abuse it. And that's why I'm going after it. That's why I'm getting in the Woolleys case. So I'm getting really involved in their case. And the reason I'm getting involved is because under our law, it says that you're innocent until proven guilty. They have not been proven guilty. They've been put in jail multiple times. They've had, the state has had multiple opportunities to go forward and have their day in court, and the state has refused because they know they haven't got a case. And now they're with moving. And again, the Fourth Amendment says that it protects you against unreasonable search and seizure. And it says that you can't come in and take what belongs to you guys. And there's nothing more precious than taking your children. And so that's what it says. It's going to protect us against the state overreaching and coming in and taking our children, taking our property, taking the things that belong to us. And again, here's where I'm at. If they got something to prove and they got something to show that y'all are guilty, then I'll be the first one to go, okay, you know what? If there's hardcore evidence that would show you're guilty, I'll say, okay, I'll shut up and I'll sit down and boom, there you go. But until they have that, and where I'm at, guess what? If they had something like that, I know 100% they would already went forward with it. So I know for them to do this 3 times, they got nothing, or they would have had something up there. So, again, I understand with DHS getting caught up in all the hype, and Bob, that's what happens. A lot of times, like they said, I mean, this is all over the media. They already said these two are guilty. DHS comes in, oh, we got to get these kids out. We can't let them have it. And then after the fact, when they've already done it, they won't come up and say, hey, we've made a bad mistake. And they're worried about getting sued. That's part of the problem, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Let me say
Bob,
one
you
other.
got any? You're being too quiet, Bob. You scared me. You got anything you want to
Well,
add?
yeah, basically what we're saying here is you're guilty. You got to prove yourself innocent,
That's exactly right.
and they don't want to accept what you have that's in it, but shows you that you're innocent.
In the beginning, when the DHS supervisor was doing all the research and investigation, he told one of our friends that worked for DHS for over 30 years that I don't see anything that happened here that's suspicious, but the detective's not going to let it go. And the common thread, to answer your question, is the detective, because I'm sure he influenced the coroner when she was here at the house, because he was alone with her in the home with the baby for at least an hour. And then he goes and shows up at the autopsy, and he ends up being involved with DHS and then with the judges. He's the connector that is influenced and biased this thing from the beginning, because he was convinced we were guilty of this crime before he even stepped foot on this property.
In one of the transcripts, he even says to Bill, he's interviewing Bill, and he says, "You hear my phone dinging like that? And my stupid phone dinging like that?" And Bill said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, down there where they're interviewing your child, they're keeping your grandson. They're keeping me informed about what's going on." So they were like corresponding while they were supposed to be interviewing him, and so he had his hands in that too. It's also very, very suspicious.
But this is not in Tulsa County,
Wagner County.
Wagner County. Now, where do you live?
Broken Arrow.
And it's in Wagner County.
Broken Arrow is 2 counties that split between Tulsa and Wagner, and we're on the eastern side of Broken Arrow.
Okay.
So, but
Well,
listen,
I tell you, we could probably spend a whole lot. There's a lot of questions I still have on this, but just to let the public know what we've done, we put together an affidavit. We sent that to all the legislators, including governor, including the AG. We're sending an inquiry to. I'm getting that prepared. Guy that's helping you guys is helping me prepare that, and I'm going to send an inquiry to the judge wanting to know how they did this, what they're doing, and proof that they had a right to take your kid, grandchild. And so again, what we're trying to do is demand, we want our day in court. We want a hearing. That's what the Constitution guarantees. Y'all been denied your rights. I think I sent, well, I don't think, I know I sent copies of that to DHS as well. So I've sent them out to all over saying, hey, if y'all got something to prove, then jump up with it and let's go with it and trot it out here. But if you ain't got something, then shut your mouth and return the kid back to the rightful guardians that have this kid. And again, I don't know if y'all, I'm sure y'all's just sick of all the legal process, but there may be litigation where you want to consider, possible civil rights, because I believe your civil rights have definitely been violated. And I know that that's really, sometimes you're just, when you go through the ordeal like y'all been through, I hadn't been anywhere close, but I've been through quite a bit. A lot of times what you want is just let me out of this and let me the hell alone is kind of where you get
Well,
to.
let me finish up and ask this question, because I know our time's getting real short. But when you went to the county jail first time, Who signed off on that? Who? No judge signed off on that at all.
Judge did in Jack Thorpe's office, prepared the arrest warrant, and the judge signed off on it. I can't remember which judge it was at this
the first
time.
time we got arrested, I think it was Judge
Langley?
Langley from Tahlequah who came over to Wagner County to do this.
What about the second time?
The second,
That would have been Kirkley,
yeah, I
most
think it
likely.
was Judge Kirby.
District.
There's always going to have to be a judge to sign those charges and to hear
Right.
you.
Third time was Luton.
Right. Judge
So
Luke.
JJ, would those judges only had the information that they,
Yeah.
not their information they have, but the
Well,
information?
Bob,
from
what a judge looks at and says, is this proper? Did the DA file proper charges? Did the DA present? And the DA is going to say, oh, yeah, we got this case. Judge is going to say, okay, I'm going to hold you over and I'm going to have you stand. You'll have a pretrial. You'll have a bail hearing. And most of the time in these kind of cases, the DA is going to be asking for no bail. If they do set bail, it's going to be up $1 million or so. And you can't hardly afford it, especially if you're losing your job and everything else. So you're going to have to sit in jail until you either go to trial or until it gets dismissed. And that's the way they'll just keep on doing it. And again, the first time, I don't have a problem with, I ain't saying our system's perfect, but I don't have a problem with that. But second time, if you're the DA, you dang well better make sure that you got a case. You don't just keep filing the same thing with nothing. If you didn't have a case good enough to go before and you got nothing new to add, then why would you refile it? Again, it makes your office look really, really bad. And that's the way I look at it, is that you don't, now if you think they're guilty, then get off your ass and go do some investigation and go out there and find the evidence. Work. That's called work. And if you ain't got it, then don't do it,
Okay,
So
but they let him out the second time. So can there be a third time?
They keep doing this all day long. Yeah, they've already done it the third time.
Brought abuse charges, neglect charges against our daughter and us. And they didn't even check on the jurisdiction, or they call it venue, when they filed those charges. We lived in Tulsa County at that time. We didn't even live in Wagner when they said that when the baby was born,
Right.
when the baby was conceived and born. We lived in Tulsa County. The baby died in Wagner County. So what they did was they changed the dates on the charges to include the death, and that went out of statute of limitations, ran out 7 months. They didn't even check that. So what did they do? They had to get around this, so they amended it the third time, and they made their own law. This is what blows my mind. The judge was in; he went along with this. They took the arrest warrant, the charges, and up there was neglect. They took that word out and put abuse in because it ran a 45-year statute of limitations instead of 2. And they made their own law by keeping everything under neglect. Those are 2 separate laws,
Right.
2 different criteria and everything, but they combined them, and the judge went along with it and said, we're going to bind this over for prelim. Wasn't shortly after that they dropped the charges for the third time.
And that's the thing that we're trying, and that's where we're getting the word out here. That's why we're having hearings on the 18th, I think on the 24th, and we're going to try to prove that, we're not following the rule of law. We're not following the Constitution, and the Constitution is what we all answer back to. So if Oklahoma's got something that's going on, statute or whatever, the Constitution trumps anything, and that's where we're going back. You can't go in, take somebody's kids without probable cause, without a hearing. You've been found innocent because you haven't been found guilty. A lot of people don't like to say that, but you're innocent until you're proven guilty, and they can't take your kids for being innocent. And that's